Welcome back to my channel. If you could do me a solid and hit subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and hit the like button, it really helps me out in the algorithm. The following stories have been crafted for sleep. These stories are about Wendigo sightings. Story number 1. The Hunter's Nightmare. I had been hunting in the dense forests of northern Minnesota for years, but nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered that cold November night. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their skeletal branches swaying in the icy wind as I followed the fresh tracks of a deer. My rifle was loaded, my senses sharp. I was alone, or so I thought. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of an eerie stillness. The usual sounds of the forest, rustling leaves, distant howls, and scurrying critters, vanished. It was as if the world itself had taken a breath and refused to exhale. That was when I saw it. A figure loomed in the shadows between the trees. It stood unnaturally tall, its limbs elongated and skeletal, and its face, a twisted, hollow-eyed visage, sent ice through my veins. Its skin clung tightly to its bones, as though it had been starved for centuries. Worse, it smelled of decay, a rancid odour that made my stomach lurch. Then it spoke, a voice, hollow and inhumane, called my name. I didn't stop to think. I ran, my boots pounded against the forest floor, but the thing pursued me, its gaunt form moving impossibly fast. My chest burned, my legs ached, but still I ran. When I finally burst into the clearing near my truck, I turned to look one last time. It was gone. The next morning I found deer carcasses strung up in the trees, their bodies torn apart, with precision too sinister to belong to any natural predator. I never returned to those woods again. Story number 2. The Forgotten Cabin. We had always joked about the legends surrounding the Wendigo, but deep down we all felt a chill whenever old folks spoke of it. Still, that didn't stop me and my friends coming from setting up camp near an abandoned cabin deep in the Canadian wilderness. The first day was uneventful, hiking, fishing, the usual, but that night everything changed. A distant wailing drifted through the trees, a sound so unnatural it made our skin crawl. We told ourselves it was just the wind, but unease settled over us like a heavy fog. As the night wore on, we heard something circling our campsite. Heavy footsteps, deliberate, predatory. Then came the scratching at the cabin door. We froze. My friend Jason grabbed his flashlight and shone it outside. That's when we saw it. A towering figure with hollow eyes and jagged yellow teeth. Its arms, too long for its body, twitched with unnatural movements. It let out a guttural growl before slamming its bony hand against the door. We barricaded ourselves inside, our breath coming in short gasps. The creature circled us all night, its whispers seeing through the wooden walls, calling our names. When dawn broke, the noises stopped. We emerged shaken but alive. We left everything behind and hiked out of those woods, vowing never to speak of that night again. Some things should remain forgotten. Story number 3. The Lost Hiker. It was supposed to be a simple solo hiking trip, a chance to disconnect from the city life and find peace in the mountains, but peace was the last thing I found. The first few days were perfect. The trails were untouched, the scenery breathtaking, but on the third night I sat by my fire, I noticed something strange. The woods were silent, not a single sound, no crickets, no owls, nothing. That was when I saw the eyes, a pair of glowing orbs high in the trees, watching me. They disappeared before I could grab my flashlight. My gut told me to leave, but stubbornness kept me rooted. That was my mistake. A blood-curdling scream split the night. It wasn't human, nor animal. It was something else entirely. I grabbed my gear and I bolted, adrenaline pushing me forward, but the deeper I ran, the more lost I became. Then I heard the breathing, ragged, laboured, close. I turned, and it was there, a Wendigo. Its skeletal frame lurched towards me, its gaping mouth dripping with something black. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing into the dirt. The last thing I remember before passing out was a cold breath against my neck. Then I woke. It was morning. My camp was in ruins, but I was unharmed. It had spared me. But why? I didn't stay to find out. Story 4. The Ice Fisherman. I've been ice fishing on the frozen lakes of the northern woods for as long as I can remember. The deep cold never bothered me until that day. It was just me out in the lake, a small hut for a shelter, a fishing rod in hand. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps crunching through the snow, coming from just outside my hut. At first I thought it was another fisherman, though I was surprised they could have gotten so close without me hearing the snowmobile. I opened the door, but no one was there. The air was biting, and the only sounds were the wind and the soft creaking of the ice beneath me. I stepped outside, my breath freezing in the air, and looked around. There was no sign of movement, but something felt off. That's when I saw it. A figure, standing in the distance, barely visible in the twilight. It was tall, impossibly tall, and its skin was a sickly, stretched shade of grey, pulled taut over bone. Its eyes glowed a pale, unnatural yellow, and its mouth, it was too wide for any creature I'd ever seen. I was frozen in place, my heart pounded in my chest as the figure began to move towards me. It didn't walk, it glided over the snow, its limbs bending at grotesque angles. I backed into my hut, but I couldn't look away. The thing didn't reach me. As quickly as it appeared, it vanished into the trees, leaving behind only the echoes of its eerie calls. I packed up and left immediately. I haven't set foot on that lake since. Story number 5. Cabin in the Woods. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway. Just me, a few friends, and a cabin in the woods far from civilization. We rented the place on a whim, not thinking much about the stories that had been passed down for generations. We thought it would be fun. Eerie place for a weekend trip. The first night was fine. We stayed up late, laughing and drinking, telling ghost stories, but on the second night, things changed. Around midnight, we heard something, a slow, dragging sound. At first we thought it was an animal, but it didn't stop. The sound grew louder, closer. One of my friends, Max, grabbed a flashlight and went outside to investigate. We watched from the window as he walked out towards the noise, but after a few moments The light disappeared. We waited, but Max didn't return. The dragging sound continued, but it seemed to be circling the cabin. We were trapped inside. The creature came into view then, a thing with twisted limbs and hollow sunken eyes. Its body was gaunt, covered in patchy, matted fur, and it had the face of a twisted, starving man. It wasn't human. Not anymore. We didn't know what to do. The Wendigo circled our cabin, scraping its claws along the wood, trying to break in. It whispered things to us, things I can't even bring myself to repeat. In the morning, Max was gone. We found his tracks leading off into the woods, but they stopped abruptly. We left that cabin as quickly as we could, but I still hear the whispers sometime, even when I'm alone. Story number 6. The Roadside Encounter. It was late, too late, and I was driving down an isolated stretch of highway in the dead of winter. The snow was thick on the ground, the road slick and dangerous, but I had to get home. I didn't expect to see anything other than the headlights illuminating the white road ahead, but then I saw it. At first it was just a shadow in the distance, flickering at the edge of the woods. It didn't seem to move like a normal creature. I slowed my car, squinting into the dark. That's when it stepped into the road. The creature was massive, towering over my car. Its body was thin, skeletal, but its limbs were long and twisted, the fingers curling into claws. Its face was horrifying, sunken eyes that gleamed with unnatural light, and a mouth full of sharp, yellowed teeth. Its skin was stretched tight over bones, and it moved with an unnatural grace. I froze. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to drive away, but my body was paralysed with fear. Then it did something that sent chills down my spine. It tilted its head, as if studying me, before letting out a low, growling sound. I snapped out of my stupor and hit the gas, speeding away down the road. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town. The thing never followed, but every time I drive at night, I'm scared to look into the woods. I'm scared it's still out there, waiting. Story number 1. The Mirror's Reflection. Ever since I was young, I've had an inexplicable fascination with antiques. My love for objects from another era has always been a part of who I am. The intricate details, the stories behind each item, and the sense of history that radiates from them drew me in like nothing else could. So, when I came across a tall, antique mirror at the local estate sale, I didn't think twice. The price was reasonable, and the moment I saw it, I knew I had to have it. The mirror was exquisite, framed with ornate gilded carvings of roses, vines, and delicate flourishes. The glass was old, slightly cloudy, and held a reflection that seemed to stretch beyond the mere surface. There was something ethereal about it. The moment the seller told me it had been in the family for generations, I knew I was meant to take it home. The mirror found its place in my apartment, positioned perfectly in the entryway to reflect both the hallway and the living room. It immediately drew the eye of anyone who passed through, and I couldn't help but admire it every time I walked by. However, the admiration soon gave way to unease. Something felt wrong, though I couldn't put my finger on it. At first it was subtle, a slight flicker in the reflection. As soon as the mirror wasn't fully capturing reality, I stood before it, I sometimes felt like the room behind me was darker than it should be, like the shadows were thicker. The longer I stared in the mirror, the more I felt as if it were hiding something just out of view, something I wasn't meant to see. I told myself it was just my imagination, but over the following days I started feeling watched. It wasn't that I believed someone was standing behind me. No, it was worse than that. It was as though the mirror was watching me. Every time I passed by it, I felt a creeping sensation along the back of my neck. The kind you get when you feel someone's gaze on you from across the room. But when I turned round, I was always alone. A week into having the mirror, I woke up one night with a sharp, unsettling feeling in my chest. I couldn't shake the dread that clung to me in a heavy blanket. My eyes scanned the room in the dark, searching for the source of my discomfort. And that's when I saw it. The reflection in the mirror was wrong. The room appeared as it should, but it was darker than I remembered, and standing in the reflection was a figure. It wasn't me. I had been standing in the centre of the room, facing the mirror, but in the reflection a woman stood behind me. Her face was hidden in shadow, her form draped in tattered old clothes. Her eyes, though they were what stopped my heart, they were hollow, black, staring directly at me. I could feel her gaze piercing me, sending a chill deep into my bones. Frozen, I couldn't tear my eyes away. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to obey. My mouth was dry, my heart thundering in my chest. I was paralysed with fear as the woman's form slowly stepped closer in the reflection, inch by inch, her head tilted ever so slightly, as though studying me. Then she spoke. No, she whispered. The voice was low, hollow, and full of malice. "You can't escape me." The words echoed in my mind, reverberating long after they stopped. I finally managed to tear my eyes from the mirror and stumble backward, my mind racing. I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I knew I couldn't stay in that room. I ran from the apartment, heading into the night, unsure of what I was even running from. The next morning when I returned, I found everything as it should be. The mirror was still in place, reflecting the familiar hallway and living room, but I felt an overwhelming sense of dread as soon as I stepped inside. Something was different. Though I couldn't pinpoint it, I glanced into the mirror, half expecting to see the woman again, but the reflection was normal, calm, as if nothing had happened. For days after I couldn't sleep. The fear gnawed at me, growing with each passing hour. Every time I walked by the mirror, I could feel the presence lurking behind me, ready to step into view at any moment. The woman's eyes haunted me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was waiting for me, that she wanted something from me. I decided I had to do something. I tried moving the mirror to different rooms, hoping it might change something. I even attempted to cover it with a cloth, but nothing worked. The sense of being watched persisted, always lurking in the corners of my vision. And that's when I heard the whispering. It started one night, just faint enough that I thought it might be my mind playing tricks on me, but soon the whispers grew louder, more distinct. "You can't hide," they repeated over. "I'll find you." The voice was unmistakable. It was her. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get rid of the mirror. I thought of throwing it away made my stomach churn, but the idea of keeping it in my home, letting it continue to torment me, was even worse. So I took the mirror and shoved it in the basement, hoping that would be the end of it. But that night the whispers followed me. They grew louder, more urgent, and I could hear them clear as day, in the walls of my apartment. "You can't escape me," they said again, only this time they were closer. They were coming from the basement. Terrified, I rushed downstairs, but when I opened the basement door, the mirror was gone. I searched the entire basement, but there was no sign of it. No broken glass, no remnants. It had vanished. The next morning I found it sitting back in its place right where I had left it, reflecting my living room as though nothing had happened. I stared at it for a long time, my mind racing, my heart pounding. I didn't know what happened or what the woman wanted, but I couldn't live with the constant fear anymore. I moved out of the apartment that day. I left everything behind, including the mirror, and I haven't looked back since. Story number 2, The Cursed Lamp. I've always had a soft spot for vintage items, and it was no different when I stumbled upon an antique lamp at a small, dimly lit thrift shop in town. The shop, called A Second Chance, was tucked away on a quiet street, filled with old furniture, mismatched crockery, and various forgotten objects. I had walked in looking for something unique, a treasure to bring home, and that's when I saw it, a brass lamp, adorned with intricate floral engravings and a beautifully coloured stainless glass shade. It was gorgeous. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with soft grey hair, told me it had been in her family for generations. She spoke of how it had been passed down from her great-grandmother, who had apparently owned it during the early 1900s. The lamp seemed to hold a certain elegance and mystique, and I couldn't resist. Despite the slightly steep price, I bought it and brought it home, eager to place it in my living room. At first, everything was fine. The lamp worked beautifully, casting a warm, inviting glow across the room. It quickly became a focal point of the space, and I loved how it looked next to my antique couch and bookshelf, but I didn't take it long for strange things to start happening. The first incident occurred late one night when I was reading a book. I had turned off all the lights except for the lamp, which gave a soft amber glow. I was fully immersed in the story when I noticed a shift in the air. The room seemed to glow colder, though I had my heat on, and a sudden odd smell filled the room. It was metallic, almost like the scent of rust or blood, though there was nothing in the room to cause such an odour. I glanced at the lamp, and that's when I saw it. Something was wrong. The light flickered, dimming and brightening erratically, as though it were struggling to stay on. I stood up to inspect it, but as soon as my hand brushed the lampshade, I felt a sharp, icy chill crawl up my arm. A deep, hollow whisper echoed in my ears, though no one else was in the room. I pulled my hand back, my heart racing. The lamp flickered again, and then, just as suddenly, the whisper stopped. I was left standing there, frozen and unsure of what had just happened. My rational mind tried to explain it away. Perhaps it was just a fault with the bulb, or the wiring, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. The next few days only deepened my unease. The lamp seemed to have a life of its own. I would wake in the middle of the night to find it still glowing softly, despite having turned it off before bed. One evening I returned home from work to find it on again, glowing far too brightly for the time of day. My first instinct was to turn it off, but as I approached I saw something in the reflection of the glass. In the dim light I could make out a figure, a shadowy silhouette standing beside the lamp, just barely visible in the haze of the stained glass. It was tall, unnaturally so, with limbs that seemed to stretch too far. My heart stopped in my chest. The figure didn't move, but its presence was unmistakable. My pulse pounded in my ears, and I quickly turned off the lamp, convinced my mind had simply been playing tricks on me. That night, the dream started. I had always been an avid dreamer, but these dreams were different. I found myself in an old unfamiliar house, walking through a dark hallway with flickering lamps, casting long shadows on the wall. The air was a thick and oppressive energy, and I couldn't move forward. as if something invisible was holding me back. I would wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing, only to find myself staring at the lamp in my living room. The reflection of the glass seemed to twist, pulling me in. One evening, as I sat with the lamp glowing faintly in the corner of the room, I heard the whisper again. This time it was louder, clearer. "Turn it on, turn it on." I stood up, my body trembling as I approached the lamp. There was no rational explanation for what was happening. I wasn't sure if I was losing my mind or if something truly malevolent had taken hold of the object. My fingers hesitated over the switch, but a force greater than my fear compelled me to flick it on. The moment I did, the room was filled with an icy coldness, and the whispering grew louder, almost deafening. "You shouldn't have never turned it off." The voice hissed, "Now you are mine." The glass shade of the lamp shimmered, and for the briefest of moments I could see faces, contorted in agony, pressing against the glass from the inside. The room seemed to stretch, the walls warping, as if the space was no longer confined to the boundaries of my apartment. The shadows danced erratically, swirling around me, pulling at my clothes, my hair, my thoughts. I could feel something trying to claim me, to drag me into the darkness that had overtaken the room. Panicked, I shut off the lamp again. Silence. The shadows receded. The cold dissipated, but the terror lingered. That night I knew I had to get rid of the lamp. I couldn't live with the feeling that something was haunting me, feeding on my fear. I had took the lamp and drove out to a remote location far from the city. I couldn't bear the thought of anyone else suffering from its curse, so I left in a nearby forest, away from my home. As I walked back to my car, I heard a voice, faint but unmistakable, whispering through the wind, "You can't escape me." I never spoke of it again. The memory of that cursed lamp, the presence that clung to it, and the haunting whispering continued to haunt me. Sometimes when the wind is just right, I hear it again, echoing, distant. Story 3. The Antique Doll. I had never been particularly fond of dolls. In fact, they kind of creeped me out. But when I found the antique doll at an estate sale, I couldn't resist. It was old, probably more than 100 years old, with porcelain skin and glass eyes that seemed to follow you no matter where you stood. It was dressed in a tattered white dress, the lace fraying along the edges. The seller told me it had belonged to her great-grandmother, who had passed away in the house some years ago. The doll had been carefully preserved, and it was the last remaining piece of her collection. She said it had always been a cherished object, and though she spoke of it with warmth, there was a strange hesitation in her voice. I should have listened to that hesitation. I brought the doll home and set it on a shelf in my living room. The instant I placed it there, a chill seemed to settle over the room, but I shrugged it off. It was an old doll, of course. It was cold to the touch, but as the days went on, I began to notice something unusual. The doll would appear slightly different each time I looked at it. Her head would be tilted more, or her hands would shift position, even though I hadn't touched her. It was subtle at first, but I couldn't deny it. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. But then came the first real incident. I was sitting on the couch reading a book when I heard a faint thud coming from the shelf. I paused, listening. Another thud. I slowly stood up and walked over to the shelf, my heart starting to race. There on the floor was the doll. She had fallen from her perch, landing face down. I picked her up, feeling an odd warmth radiating from her porcelain body, and carefully placed her back in her spot. The next night I woke to a strange sound, scratching, as though something was dragging across the floor. I sat up, alarmed, my eyes adjusting to the darkness, and then I saw it. The doll wasn't there where I had left her. She was standing in the middle of the room, facing me, her head tilted even further than before. Her glass eyes glowed faintly in the low light, and I could almost swear that her lips were curled into a smile. I shuddered, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck rise. My heart pounded as I quickly moved to place her back on the shelf, but this time the thought of it didn't feel right. It felt wrong, as though I was doing something I wasn't supposed to do. The following days were filled with more strange occurrences. The doll would move again, always just slightly out of place, always just enough to make me question my sanity. The whispers began next, soft, inaudible at first, but then growing louder. I heard them late at night when I was lying in bed, a low, almost imperceptible voice murmuring from the direction of the shelf. The whispers weren't words I could understand, but they were persistent. Every night they grew more pronounced, and I began to hear them during the day as well, always coming from the same spot, the spot where the doll sat. But it wasn't until one evening, when I was cleaning around the living room, that I experienced the full extent of what I had brought into my home. I was vacuuming near the shelf when I heard a noise, a soft crackling sound, like a bone breaking. I turned around just in time to see the doll's hand slowly lift, its fingers curling as though it were reaching for me. My breath caught in my throat, and I dropped to vacuum. The room was suffocatingly still as I stood frozen, staring into the doll. Her eyes, those glass eyes, seemed to stare back at me with a malevolent intent. Her smile had widened, and the whispers were now so loud they felt like they were inside my head, crawling beneath my skin. Terrified, I ran from the room, locking myself in the bedroom and not daring to leave for hours. The next day I called the seller. I needed to know what had brought it into my home. When I spoke to her, her tone was different. She was hesitant, almost apologetic. "I should have warned you," she said. "My grandmother used to tell stories about that doll. She said it was never just a toy, but a vessel for something dark, something that has been passed down through the generations." She explained that the doll had been a part of a ritual meant to bind the spirit of a deceased loved one to an object, so they could live on, forever present in the home. The doll had been used to trap the spirit of her great-grandmother, who had died under mysterious circumstances. The spirit, however, was not a peaceful one. It had slowly begun to drain the life out of everyone who owned it. I couldn't get out of the house fast enough. I sold the doll to a collector who was aware of its cursed nature, though he seemed more fascinated by its power than afraid of it. I never wanted to see it again. Story number 4. The Haunted Mirror. I had always been a collector of old, unusual things, so when I came across the mirror at a local estate sale, I knew I had to have it. It was large, at least 6 feet tall, and framed in an intricate design of gold and dark wood. The reflection was framed by ornate, swirling patterns, and I could tell from its age that it had been a prized possession of whoever owned it. It had a certain presence, as though it was more than just an object. It was something that held history within its depth. The seller told me it had belonged to a wealthy family from the early 1900s, and it was one of their most prized possessions. He mentioned that the family had been cursed, though he quickly dismissed it as local superstition. He offered it to me at a reasonable price, and I, without hesitation, brought it home. When I first placed it in my hallway, I admired its beauty. It was a kind of piece that commanded attention, and I was proud to have it. but as I walked past it I began to notice something strange. The air around the mirror felt colder, even in the middle of summer. I chalked it up to a draught of my imagination, but as the days went by I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The first night I truly felt the presence of the mirror was when I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound, a low whispering hum. At first I thought it was coming from outside, but it sounded too close, too confined to my bedroom. I turned over, my eyes instinctively flickered towards the mirror in the hallway, and that's when I saw it. A figure, just a shadow at first, standing in the reflection, right behind me. I froze. The figure was tall, wearing a dark hooded cloak. The features were indistinct, but I could make out the long bony hands that reached out towards me, their fingers crooked and elongated. My breath caught in my throat as I quickly turned over to check my surroundings. The room was empty. I spun back to the mirror, but the figure was gone. Shaken, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I couldn't get the image of the figure out of my mind. I rationalised it was a trick of the light, perhaps, of my grogginess, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something had been there, something that didn't belong. The whispers returned soon after. They were faint at first, but always there, as though they were coming from the mirror itself. At night, when I passed it in the dark, I could hear soft murmurs like an ancient language, foreign and distorted. I tried to avoid looking directly into the mirror, but the pull was undeniable. Every time I passed it, my gaze would be drawn to the reflection, to the dark shape that would sometimes appear in the corners, barely visible, but there. It wasn't long before I started seeing more. One evening, while brushing my teeth, I looked up into the mirror and saw something different. There, reflected in the glass, was a woman, pale, with dark, hollow eyes that seemed to look straight into my soul. She was standing in the hallway, staring at me, and although I couldn't hear her, I knew she was trying to say something. Her lips moved slowly, but her voice was just beyond my hearing, like a sound muffled by thick glass. I quickly turned away, my heart racing, but when I glanced back, she was gone. I didn't know what to do. The longer I kept the mirror, the stronger the presence became. The figure, the whispers, the strange sensations. It was as if the mirror was feeding off my fear. It was affecting my mind, pulling me in deeper. One night the situation escalated. I was sitting in the living room reading a book, when I heard a loud bang. It was coming from the hallway. I cautiously stood up and walked towards the mirror, though I didn't want to. As I approached, I felt the temperature drop drastically, and air seemed to press against me, heavy and thick. When I reached the mirror, I was horrified to see the figure again, but this time it wasn't just standing there, it was moving. Its hands were now pressed against the glass, its face contorted in an expression of rage. I stumbled backwards, my breath coming in shallow gasps. That's when the whispers became deafening. I could hear them clearly now, as though they were surrounding me, coming from the mirror, from the very walls themselves. "Leave this place," the voice rasped, distorted and ancient. "The mirror belongs to us." I don't know how I managed to get out of the house that night, but I did. I fled, leaving everything behind, including the mirror. I contacted the antique dealer, asking them to take it off my hands. The dealer came back and collected it, offering me a generous sum, but I didn't care. I just wanted it gone. The last time I saw the mirror, it was sitting in the dealer's truck, covered in a cloth. I walked away, never looking back, and I haven't stepped foot near an antique mirror since. I still hear the whispers, sometimes like a distant echo, reminding me of the curse I nearly brought into my life. Story number 5. The Cursed Music Box. When I first stumbled upon the music box, it wasn't in the way I'd hoped. I'd been visiting an old thrift store downtown, hoping to find a rare book or an old painting to add to my collection. But there it was, sitting on a dusty shelf in the back corner of the store. A delicate, antique music box. It was small, made of light oak wood, with intricate carvings of roses around the edges, and the brass handles gleaming despite its age. The lid was slightly ajar, revealing tiny gears inside. There was something magnetic about it. As soon as I saw it, I knew I had to have it. The shopkeeper, a frail old man, told me that it had been sitting there for years, unsold and mostly forgotten. He seemed oddly reluctant to be parting with it, and when I asked if there was any story behind the music box, he only mumbled something about it being cursed. I laughed it off, assuming it was just the ramblings of an old man who'd seen too many years pass by. I took the music box home, placing it on my coffee table. I had been struggling with insomnia for weeks, and I thought the soft, soothing tune that the box played might help me sleep. That night I wound it up and let it play. The first few notes were sweet and innocent, but the melody soft and familiar. But as the music played, something changed. It wasn't the song itself, but the atmosphere in the room. A strange, oppressive feeling began to settle around me, and the air grew heavier. I felt like I was being watched, like eyes were on me. Though I was alone in the room, the music began to distort, warping into a twisted version of itself, the notes screeching and echoing unnaturally in the small space. I rushed to turn off the music box, but no matter how much I wound the key, the music continued to play. The melody grew louder and more dissonant, the gears grinding against each other, with a screeching sound that made my skin crawl. It felt like it was vibrating with energy, like something was trying to escape. Suddenly it stopped. The music box fell silent, and the temperature of the room plummeted. I sat there, my heart racing, not knowing what to do. Then, from the corner of the room, I heard it, a voice, faint at first, then clearer, until it was right beside me. "Help me!" I jumped up, my breath hitching in my throat. The voice sounded desperate, and it seemed to come from the direction of the music box. But when I turned to look, the box sat innocently on the table, as if nothing had happened. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that washed over me. It was my mind playing tricks on me, I convinced myself. But as the days went by, strange things started to happen. Objects in my apartment would move on their own. Books would fall off shelves. Furniture would shift slightly when I wasn't looking. I'd hear strange scratching noises in the middle of the night, as if something was clawing at the walls. I couldn't sleep. Every night I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the whispers that seemed to come from the music box. Each time the voice would call to me, "Help me." I decided to do some research. The store had told me nothing of the music box's origins, so I started digging through old newspapers and records, hoping to find some clue. What I discovered terrified me. The music box had once belonged to a young girl named Evelyn, who lived in a small town not far from where I now lived. She had been the only child of a wealthy family, and according to the articles I found, she had died under mysterious circumstances. Her parents had claimed that she had fallen ill suddenly, but the details were sketchy. There were whispers of a curse, rumours that Evelyn had made a pact with something dark in exchange for the music box, something that would keep her spirit tethered to the world of the living. The more I read, the more I realised that the voice I was hearing was not just a figment of my imagination. It was Evelyn, and she was trapped inside that music box. That night I decided to do something about it. I took the box to the local church, hoping the priest might be able to cleanse it. I placed it on the altar, but before they could do anything, the temperature in the room dropped. The lights flickered. The priest was about to say a prayer when the music box began to play, the distorted tune filling the church. The whispers grew louder, and the voice of Evelyn screamed out, "Help me, set me free." The priest tried to grab the box, but as soon as their hands touched it, they recoiled, as though burned by its cold surface. The voice became frantic, and the church doors slammed shut. Panic set in. I could feel something malevolent swirling in the air, something ancient and dark. The box was too powerful. With the help of the priests, I eventually managed to seal the music box inside a locked vault at the church. We thought we had contained it, but I knew deep down that the curse would never truly be gone. It had attached itself to a box, and the moment it was opened again, the horror would begin anew. Story number 6. The Portrait in the Attic. It was a house that had been in the family for generations, passed down from relative to relative, until it finally came to me. I never thought much of it. Sure, it had its quirks, creaky floorboards, an old-fashioned layout, but it had always been a home. What I didn't know, what none of us had known, was that there was something hidden away in the attic, a relic of our family's past that would soon begin to haunt me. I was sorting through the boxes in the attic one afternoon when I found it, an old portrait, framed in tarnished gold. The painting depicted a woman, her face pale and sombre, her eyes dark, almost too dark. She was dressed in a Victorian gown, and there was a sadness to her expression that I couldn't quite explain. She seemed to be looking directly at me, as if waiting for me to notice her. I'd never seen this portrait before. My family was known for its wealth and its history of fine art collection, but this particular painting didn't belong to any known artist. It was unsigned, and I couldn't find any record of it in the family archives. Curious, I moved it to the dusty corner where I'd found it, and brought it downstairs, determined to learn more about the woman in the portrait. At first, I kept the painting in my study, leaning it against the wall. Every time I passed it, I felt the same sensation, that eerie feeling that the woman was staring right at me. I chalked it up to an overactive imagination, but as the days wore on, the feeling didn't fade. It intensified. The first strange occurrence happened one evening when I was working late in my study. I was typing away on my laptop, the only light coming from the desk lamp, when I heard it, a soft sound, like a whispering breeze, but it was coming from the direction of the portrait. I looked up, half expecting to see the frame fall or shift, but nothing had changed. The painting was perfectly still, as it had been since I brought it downstairs, but something in the air felt off. It felt colder, and when I turned back to my computer, I could have sworn I saw movement in the corner of my eye, just the faintest shift of the woman's face in the painting. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought as paranoia, but the unease lingered. The next night things escalated. I was woken by the sound of footsteps, soft but deliberate, coming from upstairs. I knew there was no one else in the house. My heart raced as I climbed out of bed and crept towards the stairs. My footsteps grew louder as I ascended to the second floor, and when I reached the top, I froze. The attic door was wide open, something that hadn't been the case since I went to bed. I approached cautiously, each step heavier than the last, and pushed the door open. Inside, the portrait was no longer leaning against the wall in my study. It was now standing upright, placed carefully on the easel, right in the centre of the attic, facing the darkened corner of the room. I felt the temperature drop instantly, a chill that pierced through me like a knife. The whispering had started again, but this time it was clearer, closer. A voice, soft and feminine, but laced with sorrow and desperation, came from the painting. "Please, help me." I stumbled back, my mind racing. I wanted to turn and run, but something held me there, rooted to the spot. The voice wasn't just in my head, it was coming from the painting itself, its tones reverberating through the walls, echoing in the room. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the portrait, ran downstairs, and locked it in the basement. But that night, no matter how much I tried to sleep, the whispers followed me. They grew louder, more urgent, until I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know who she was, what she wanted, and why she was haunting me. I spent days researching the house's history, poring over old documents, family letters and diaries. Eventually, I stumbled across a journal that belonged to my great-great-grandmother. In it, she described a tragic tale, one of love, betrayal, and death. The woman in the portrait was her sister, Eleanor. Eleanor had been engaged to a wealthy man, but on the eve of their wedding, he disappeared without a trace. Distraught, Eleanor fell into a deep depression, and it wasn't long before strange things began to happen around her. Servants spoke of hearing whispers at night, of seeing Eleanor's figure in the woods when she wasn't near. Eventually, Eleanor was found dead in the attic, a look of terror frozen on her face, clutching the portrait in her hands. The journal hinted at something far darker. Eleanor had apparently made a pact with something, with someone, that promised to bring her back, bring her true love back, but instead the entity took her soul, trapping it in the painting for all eternity. As I read those words, I began to understand the whispers, the strange occurrences. Eleanor had been trying to contact me, to reach out from the confines of the portrait. She wanted something, perhaps for me to undo the pact, to free her from her painting's curse. I wasn't sure how to break the curse, but I knew I couldn't leave the portrait locked in the basement. It was clear now that the painting wasn't just a piece of art, it was a prison, a vessel for Eleanor's trapped soul. I had to find a way to release her, or risk being haunted forever. That night I returned the portrait to the attic, placing it carefully where I'd first found it. I spoke the words that I had read in the journal, calling out to Eleanor, asking for forgiveness, asking for peace. And as I spoke, the whispers grew softer, the air warmer. The painting's gaze seemed to soften, and for a moment I thought I saw a faint smile across Eleanor's lips. The whispers stopped. The next morning I went up to the attic half expecting to find the portrait just as it had been, but when I saw it I gasped. The woman in the painting was no longer staring at me with dark, sorrowful eyes. The face was peaceful, serene, as though she had finally found rest. I don't know if I truly freed her spirit that night, or if the curse was simply quieted for now, but I haven't heard the whispers since, and the house feels a little less cold. I hope that wherever Eleanor is now, she's found peace she so desperately sought. Story number 1. 347 feet. It started as a typical Thursday night, bored, alone, lying in bed with a beer and my phone, scrolling through Grindr, mindless swipes. Half the profiles were headless torsos. A few gym bros, some blank bios, nothing interesting. Then I saw it. Profile name, none. Picture, none. Bio, close. Distance, 347 feet. That made me sit up. I live on the 7th floor of an old brownstone building, the top floor. The apartment next door is vacant, and the nearest building is across the street. So how could someone be 347 feet away? I stared at the screen. Something about the profile tugged at the back of my brain. Against my better judgment, I messaged, "Hey, you live in the building?" I got an instant reply, "You look peaceful when you sleep." I froze. I hadn't posted any sleeping photos. Hell, I never post anything personal. I use a single selfie and I keep it vague. I swallowed hard and typed, "Is this a joke?" Another photo came through. My blood turned to ice. It was me in bed sleeping, my face buried in the pillow, hair messy, taken from above, like someone had been standing over me while I slept. I bolted upright and looked around. My curtains were closed, door locked, window shut. I messaged again, heart hammering, "Who are you?" Nothing, but the profile stayed online. I checked the distance again. 347 feet had changed to 292. He was moving. I jumped up, grabbed the baseball bat that I kept behind the dresser. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but it felt better than nothing. I checked every room, every closet, under the bed. Empty. Back on the app, the profile still hovered there. 204 feet. I pulled back the living room curtains and peeked onto the street. No one, just the flicker of a corner street lamp. Then I heard it, a soft creak, like a door hinge, from the hallway. I tipped to the peephole and held my breath. Nothing. Then I looked down. A slip of paper was being slid under my door. I didn't want to touch it, but I couldn't stop myself. I unfolded it with shaking fingers. Written in blocky handwriting. "I like this shirt better than the red one." I was wearing a blue shirt. The red one was in my laundry hamper. I wore it yesterday. I dropped the note like it had burned me. I called the cops. They said they'd dispatch something right away. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. Backing into the corner, phone still in hand, I refreshed the app one more time. 47 feet. Another message popped up. "You forgot to lock your closet." I turned. The bedroom closet door was cracked open, just slightly. I knew I'd closed it. My hands were slick with sweat as I raised the bat and stepped closer. I kicked the door open and nothing. Just clothes, dust and boxes. I let out a shaky breath. The sound of sirens cut through the night. I bolted to the window and looked out. A squad car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out. I met them at the door and explained everything. The app, the messages, the picture. They took it seriously, thank God. They did a full sweep of the apartment, top to bottom. One of them found smudges on the fire escape outside my bedroom window. Another found a cigarette butt on the roof, still lit. They checked the building's security cameras. At 12:47 a.m, the footage showed a man in dark clothes and a hood slipping into the building. He knew the layout. He didn't hesitate. He disabled one of the hallway cams with a practiced flick of his wrist. Then he disappeared up the stairwell. But the footage never showed him leaving, which meant he was still inside. SWAT was called in. They evacuated the entire building. Room by room, they searched. They found him on the roof, crouched behind the HVAC unit, phone still open, grinder pulled up. He had dozens of photos on his phone, all of me, some taken through my windows, some from inside the apartment, from nights I'd been asleep. He'd been watching me for weeks, maybe months. His name was Daniel, and he'd lived in the next building over, a delivery guy. Nobody suspected him. Quiet, polite, the perfect invisible neighbour. The cops said I was lucky that I called in time, that I hadn't had the chance to do whatever he'd planned. I moved out a week later, changed cities, changed my number, and deleted Grindr. But sometimes, when I'm walking home alone, I pull out my phone just to check the distance of the nearest profile. If I ever see 347 feet again, I'm not waiting this time. Story number 2. Online. We matched in April. His name was Elias. Late 30s, tall, soft eyes behind thick black glasses. He was warm, funny, nerdy in a charming way. A library science grad student, totally my type. We met for coffee, then dinner. He always wore those vintage cardigans, smelled faintly of cedarwood. There was something a little melancholy about him, but I liked that. We kissed on the third date. I thought it might turn into something real. Then, out of nowhere, he ghosted me. No text, no "I'm busy", just nothing. I messaged once, then again a week later. No response. His Grindr profile was gone. Facebook locked down. His number went straight to voicemail. I felt foolish, like I'd misread everything. I beat myself up over it. Until 2 weeks later, when someone sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post. R.I.P. Elias Thompson. You were taken too soon. We love you. A car crash, single vehicle accident. They said he hit black ice and veered off a bridge. It happened the night after our last date. I sat on my bed and just stared at the screen. I hadn't imagined it. He was real. And now, he was gone. A weird emptiness followed me for weeks. And then, it got worse. One night, I opened Grindr out of boredom. I wasn't even looking for anything. I was just scrolling. And there he was. Elias, online, 2 miles away. Same pic, same bio. The bio said, "Let's go for a drive." My heart skipped. It had to be someone using his photo, but the profile wasn't new. It had the same connection timestamp, the same chat history. Then the message came. Miss me? I stared at it for a long time. Too long. Finally I replied, Who is this? He responded instantly, You know me. I sat up, a cold dread settling in my chest. Elias is dead. Then he sent a picture. Not a selfie, a photo of me, taken right now, sitting in bed, staring at my phone. The exact angle someone would have if they were outside my window. I leapt up and yanked the curtains open. No one, but then I heard it, an engine idling. I rushed to the window and looked down at the driveway. Nothing there. But there were tyre tracks, fresh, wet, like something had just pulled in, then vanished. I locked every door and window in the house. Another ping. He'd sent a live location pin. It was moving, coming toward me. I turned off my phone. I didn't want to see it anymore. I called my friend Marcus and begged him to come over. Told him I was having a panic attack. Marcus stayed the night. The next morning I tried to show him the profile, but it was gone, completely erased, like it never existed. I thought maybe I'd had a breakdown, grief, hallucination maybe, but then it happened again, a week later. Different profile, blank name, no picture, just a message. Get in. And a photo. A car. The same old 90s Toyota Elias used to drive, beaten up blue with one cracked tail light, parked at the end of my street. I walked outside to prove it wasn't real. And there it was. The same exact car. Only no one was in it. The engine was still running. I stepped closer, the driver's side door creaked open, and I ran. The police said there was no one registered to that car in the area. Security cam footage glitched for 20 minutes that night. Just black static. I decided I was done. I contacted Elias's brother, told him everything. He didn't laugh. He didn't say I was crazy. He said, "You're not the first." Apparently 2 other men Elias had dated, both casual flings, had seen his profile come back after he died. One received a message that said, "Come for a ride, it's lonely out here." That guy left town and never spoke about it again. His brother believed Elias's spirit was stuck. The car crash was violent. Unfinished business maybe. I asked him what I could do. He paused and said, "Drive out there where it happened and bring something of his." It sounded stupid, but I couldn't take one more night of being haunted, so I did it. I drove 2 hours north, where Elias's car had gone off the old 2-lane bridge. The spot was still marked, withered flowers, a small white cross. I stood at the edge and pulled Elias's library card out of my coat pocket, one he'd left in my car. I read his name out loud. I told him I was sorry he didn't get to say goodbye. Then I said goodbye for him. As I stood there, my phone buzzed. One last message from that familiar profile. "Thank you." And then, like a candle being snuffed out, the profile disappeared. Gone. No distance, no picture, no status. Just peace. It's been 4 months. I haven't seen Elias since. But every year on the night we first met, I leave my passenger seat open, just in case he needs one last ride home. Story number 3. The blank profile. It started with a blank profile. No name, no pic. Just the distance, 1.3 miles away. I wouldn't have thought twice about it. Grinders full of faceless ghosts, and DL discreet only dudes. But then the profile messaged me. No text, just a photo. Of me. Standing outside my gym, looking down at my phone. I was in workout shorts and a tank. Headphones in. I hadn't taken that picture. I hadn't sent it to anyone. I replied, where did you get that? Type in bubbles. Then, gone. Another photo came through. Me again, in my apartment this time, sitting on the couch. wearing the hoodie that I was currently wearing. That was enough to send a chill right through me. I bolted to my window and peeked out. No one on the street, no weird cars, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I lived on the second floor, not exactly Spy Central. I messaged again. Okay, this is fucked up. Who are you? No answer. I reported the profile. An hour later, the profile had vanished. That should have been the end of it. But 3 nights later, I got a message from a new profile, also blank, except this time it had a photo. My face, smiling. Same nose ring, same mole under the left eye, same faded black t-shirt I'd worn at my last mirror selfie. Except I hadn't taken this photo. This version of me had a different expression, smug, almost mocking. Then came the message. Nice face, I'm trying it on. Something about that phrasing made me nauseous. I slammed the app shut, called my best friend Trey and told him about the whole thing. You need cameras, bro, he said. Someone's messing with you hard. He came over with a couple of cheap motion sensor cameras and helped me set them up, one facing the window and one facing my door. That night I barely slept. At 11 minutes past 3 a.m, I woke to a click, the sound of my front door unlocking, except I lived alone, and I always locked it. I grabbed a bat from under my bed and crept toward the hallway, heart pounding in my throat. The knob turned. Then, silence. No footsteps, no creaking floorboards, just an empty hallway. I locked the door again, barricaded it with a chair. Next morning I checked the camera footage. The door never opened. But the window cam, it had glitched, just for 12 seconds, and when it came back, my front door was slightly ajar, like someone had come in and left, fast. The only trace? A smudge on the doorknob that wasn't there before. I called the cops. They found no forced entry, suggested maybe I left it open, gave me a pamphlet about urban paranoia. I wasn't paranoid. Not when 2 days later the profile returned. Same photo of me, still smiling. This time it had a name. Taylor_2. That's my name, and I don't go by _2. The messages started again. You wear yourself well, but your skin's a little tight. Don't worry, I'll fix that soon. That night I took Trey's advice seriously, booked a hotel for the weekend, left town with just a backpack and my laptop. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, but the second I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, the profile showed up again. 0.3 miles away. Then, a photo, not of me this time, of the hotel lobby, taken 5 minutes ago. And the message? Close. I didn't go back to the room. I went straight to the police. This time, they didn't shrug it off. They pulled traffic cam footage, ran the profile IP, cross-checked phone pings. What they found chilled me to the core. The photos were being uploaded from a burner phone, cheap prepaid devices bought in cash, always used once, then tossed. But in the hotel footage they saw a man in a hoodie following me inside. He never approached me, he just watched, then he left. The footage was blurry, but facial recognition caught something, and this is where it gets unreal. They couldn't match it to anyone, but what they did find, he was wearing a mask. A silicone mask of my face. Perfect, smooth, realistic, almost indistinguishable on camera. He'd 3D printed it somehow, using my public selfies, my dating app pics, maybe even screenshots he'd secretly taken. He was trying to become me. Copying my clothes, my expressions, my walk. Police found a storage unit rented under a fake name. Inside, they found a closet full of clothes matching mine. A wall of printed selfies, mine, again and again. Mannequin heads wearing variations of the mask. And a note. Soon you won't be needed. I'll take it from here. They never caught him, but after the police raid, the profile vanished for good. No more messages, no more sightings. The signal went dark. I moved. New city, new phone. I don't use Grindr anymore. Sometimes though, I catch glimpses and reflections. A figure walking behind me with my gait, my posture. A flash of my face in a crowd, smiling too wide. But I keep walking, because I'm still me, and he didn't win. Not this time. Story number 1, The Disappearing Evidence. I've never told anyone the full story, not really. They would have said it was the wine, or that I was dreaming, or making it up for attention, as if a middle-aged teacher in a logging town has time to chase UFOs for fun. It happened on a Tuesday night in October. I remember because the wind was up and the leaves were blowing wild against the windows. I was grading papers on the couch. TV was humming, some late-night quiz show in the background. Then the lights flickered, twice, and then the sound cut out. Total silence. I stood up, thinking the power had gone, but the light from the lamp was still there, dim and strange, not yellow, but almost bluish, like the colour of snow under the moonlight. That's when I noticed the window glowing, not just the curtains, the actual glass, lit up from the outside. I stepped out onto the porch and looked up. There it was, a triangle, hanging silently over the trees at the edge of my property. No noise, not even the wind anymore. 3 white lights pulsed at the corners, and in the centre, a red circle spun slowly, almost lazily. It wasn't huge, maybe the size of a house, but it hovered maybe 40 feet up, dead still. I just stood there, mouth open, barefoot on the porch, head thudding like I knew something I didn't. Then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying in the living room floor, still holding a red pen, one shoe off. The clock on the wall said 2:17 a.m. I had gone out there around 9. I'd lost 5 hours. I chalked it up to a fainting spell, or maybe I dozed off. But then came the dreams. I started having the same one every night, me floating in a vast metallic room. No walls, just silver light. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream. Tall figures stood around me, not human, thin, long arms, giant dark eyes that didn't blink. They didn't speak, but I knew what they were thinking. You're not supposed to be here yet. On the 3rd morning after the sighting, I went to check the yard where I'd seen the thing. I don't know what I expected, but I sure didn't expect what I found. 3 perfect circles were burned into the grass, each one about 6 feet across. Nothing else touched. The soil was baked dry beneath them, like it had been microwaved. I took pictures. I even got some Polaroids, just in case. I went back inside and called the local newspaper. I left a message. They never called back. 2 days later, They came. It was a Saturday afternoon, quiet. I was sipping coffee and doing crosswords in the kitchen. Then 3 knocks, heavy and slow. 2 men stood on my porch. Both wore black suits and black fedoras, not a stitch of colour on them. One was tall and stiff, with skin that looked too smooth. The other was shorter, with an odd way of smiling, like he'd been told what smiling looked like but had never done it himself. "Good afternoon, Miss May," the tall one said. "We'd like to speak to you about the event you may or may not have witnessed." They never introduced themselves, no badges, no credentials, just the suits and that cold politeness. I didn't invite them in, but they walked past me anyway. The tall one asked questions in a flat, robotic tone, not about what I saw, but about what I remembered, exacting phrases, colours, shapes, sounds. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. Were their eyes more almond or elliptical? I hadn't told anyone about the dream, not one word. My voice cracked when I asked who they were. The shorter one just smiled wider and said, "We're with the department that handles such things." I asked, "What department?" "Classified," the tall one said. They left as suddenly as they came. No car in the driveway, no footsteps on the gravel, just gone. That night I went to get the negatives and Polaroids from the kitchen drawer. All gone. The camera too. No sign of forced entry. The door was locked. I called the sheriff. He came out and took notes and said he'd look into it. When I called a week later to follow up, I was told there was no report filed, no record of my call. Things got weirder after that. For the next 2 months my phone would ring just once at random hours. I'd answer and there'd be silence. Then a faint click, like someone hanging up or listening in. My mailbox was opened several times, the flag raised but nothing inside. I stopped sleeping, stopped going out at night. One evening I walked into my bedroom and froze. My window, normally locked, was open. On the windowsill sat one Polaroid. The photo showed my backyard, the burned circle in clear detail. But across it someone had drawn a big black X in permanent marker. On the back, in tiny neat letters, were the words, "You saw nothing. There is nothing to remember." I burned the photo in the sink. After that, the phone stopped ringing. The mailbox stayed shut. No more dreams. But I've never shaken that feeling that they're still watching. From the woods, from the sky, from behind blank, unblinking eyes. So no, I don't talk about it. Not to the neighbours, not to the kids at school, not even to my sister anymore. I grade my papers, drink my coffee, and I don't look up at the night sky, because I know what's up there. And I know they don't like it when we remember. Story number 2. The Motel Room Visitor. You spend enough nights on the road and you start to see weird stuff. Deer that stare at you. Too long. People walking highways in the middle of nowhere. Lights where there shouldn't be lights. But nothing ever shook me like what happened that night in Arizona. I was heading east on I-40, maybe 50 miles past Kingman. Then I saw the thing. I pulled off onto the side road to get a few hours sleep. I remember the time exactly. 11:34 p.m. I only remember because I just clicked off my CB and checked my wristwatch. Then the cab lit up like daylight. No sound, no engine, just this glowing saucer about 100 feet off the ground, maybe 20 feet across, hovering above the desert like it was stuck there. It moved with me when I stepped out, glided almost, like it was watching. I raised my hand, dumb, I know, but I didn't know what else to do. It pulsed, once, twice, then zipped off like a shot towards the horizon. gone in a blink. That was it. No lost time. No aliens climbing out. Just me, the stars, and an empty sky that suddenly felt a lot bigger than it had an hour before. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next night I stopped at a motel inside Winslow, a dusty little place. Nothing fancy, but it had a working lock and hot water. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. 3 knocks, slow and heavy. Sounded more like someone pushing on the door than knocking. I figured it was a manager, so I opened it without thinking. Big mistake. The guy standing there was off, right from the start. He was wearing a black suit, like full-on church funeral type, in the desert, at night, no dust on him, a black fedora, black shoes, not even a wrinkle on his lapel. His skin was pale, but not just pale, it looked artificial, like wax, like someone had stretched fake skin over a mannequin part. No facial hair, no eyebrows, just these dark eyes and a tight, unmoving mouth. He looked at me, then glanced around the room like he was double-checking something. "You are Mr. Morales?" Not a question, a statement. Yeah," I said. "You witnessed an aerial anomaly last night." I didn't know what to say. "I might have? Who are you?" He smiled, but only with his mouth. His eyes never moved. "Your cooperation is appreciated. Discussion of what you think you saw is inadvisable." Then he paused, tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. His lips barely moved, but he said, "You will forget, or we will come back. Next time, you will not remember us either." And then he just turned and walked away. I watched him go, but here's the weirdest part. He never walked past the window. I was waiting to see him cross the parking lot, but he never showed up in the glass. I opened the door again, looked out. Nothing. No car, no footsteps. I barely slept that night, kept the light on, door bolted, chair wedged under the knob. The next morning, things got worse. I went out to my truck. Everything looked normal until I climbed into the cab and saw the dash cam was missing. Not torn out, just gone. The wiring was untouched. The mount was still there, but the camera and the microcassette inside had vanished. I went to the motel front desk to ask if anyone had come into my room the night before. The clerk looked at me like I was nuts. "Saw you come in alone." Nobody came up after. I'd have seen it. I asked if they had security cameras. He laughed. "You think this place can afford cameras?" I left that morning and kept moving, but for the next few days weird things kept happening. I'd wake up and my stuff would be slightly moved. Not stolen, just wrong. My toothbrush in the wrong pocket. My clothes folded weirdly. One time I found my duffel bag re-zipped from the inside. And always I'd get this feeling before it happened, like something electric in the air. My scalp would tingle, my fillings would ache. I started to wonder if I'd actually been abducted, if maybe the lights in the sky were at the end of it. Maybe they were just the start. A week later it happened again. Different motel, different state, same 3 knocks. I didn't open the door this time. I didn't even move. He spoke through it. "You were warned." Then, silence. I counted to 60. Opened the door. Nothing. Since then I've stopped sleeping in motels. I sleep in the truck now. Cab locked. Camera hidden. I don't talk about the sighting to anyone except people like you. Folks who believe in this stuff. Everyone else thinks I'm nuts. I probably would too, if it hadn't happened to me. But I know what I saw, and I know that guy, that thing, was not from any government agency. He wasn't even human. I don't think he ever was. So if you ever see lights in the sky and think, wow, cool, aliens, just remember, it's not the craft you need to be afraid of. It's what comes after. Story number 3, The Vanishing. You don't expect something life-changing to happen on a fishing trip. You expect beer, maybe a few laughs, and if you're lucky, a good story about catching a 5-pound trout that was this close to getting away. But what I got that night, it wasn't the kind of story you can tell at parties. I was 23, still living at home with my parents in a small town off the coast. Me and a couple of friends had gone camping near a lake about an hour north. Way off the beaten path, just a fire, a cooler of moosehead, and a couple of tents. The sky was weird that night. You could see the stars sharp and clear, like they were pushing in closer than usual. No moon, just a thick silence, the kind that feels like it's holding its breath. That's when we saw the light. It wasn't a plane, no blinking, no sound, just a bright white orb, moving low and fast across the water. It stopped over the lake, hovered, then it flashed, like a camera going off in your face, and vanished. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in my tent, sunlight hitting my eyes, head pounding. I looked at my watch. 10:22 a.m. I had no memory of crawling into the tent, neither did my friends. One of them, Mike, was weirdly quiet all morning. The other, Jared, kept saying he had a nightmare about drowning in the sky. Not falling, drowning. When I got home that afternoon, I noticed something strange in the bathroom mirror. A small red mark behind my left ear, like a pinprick. It didn't hurt, but it itched like hell. That night I had dreams. Metallic rooms, beings without faces, a humming sound that shook to my bones. I woke up with my sheets soaked in sweat. The next few days, I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the light, that we all got too drunk, that the dreams didn't mean anything. Then he showed up. I was home alone, sitting at the kitchen table, writing out a letter to move on. Yeah, I'd gotten that obsessed. I had a stack of notes, sketches of what I'd seen, and a page from my journal. There was a knock at the door. Not the front one, the side door, the one nobody used. I opened it slowly. The man standing there was tall, like too tall, 6'5" at least, rail thin, wearing a black suit and an old-fashioned 1950s movie fedora, black tie, even black gloves. The creepiest part? His skin was greyish, like wax paper left out in the sun. He spoke without moving his lips much. "You are Thomas. You have witnessed something." I stared at him. Heart was jackhammering. Who are you?" "That is not important," he said. "You will cease your inquiries. You will destroy all written material. Your experience is not to be remembered." And then he smiled. God, that smile. Too wide, too still, like a doll's mouth drawn on with a marker. I backed away, slammed the door, locked it. I ran to the window, just a few seconds later, to see where he'd gone. Nothing. No one on the lawn, no footsteps, no car, just an empty street. I even stepped outside, looked around. I swear it was like he'd vanished into thin air. There weren't even tyre tracks in the dirt where a car might have parked. Later that night, I decided to take a photo through my bedroom blinds. Paranoia, I guess. I figured if he came back, I'd catch him in the act. The photo developed the next day. I remember standing there in the dark room, watching the image come into view. Empty street, my house, the trees, but no man, no shadow, no car. But here's the thing that chilled me. In the bottom right corner of the image, barely visible in the grain, was what looked like a smudge. Not a camera flaw, no, this was deliberate. A dark, vague shape, like a person mid-step, but distorted, warped, like something caught in a glitch. I still have that photo. I kept seeing him for weeks after, out of the corner of my eye, across the street at 3 a.m, standing at the edge of the woods near the lake, always at a distance, always when no one else was around. I started sleepwalking, woke up in the backyard once, barefoot, shivering, staring at the trees. Another time I found myself standing in the kitchen, holding a glass of water, but I don't remember pouring. I burned my notes, tore up the sketches. I even wrote a fake retraction letter to MUFON, claiming I made it all up. That seemed to help. The sightings stopped. The dreams faded. Until last year. I was at a thrift shop, flipping through old books, and found one called Visitors from Beyond. On the inside cover was a black and white photo of a man in a suit, standing near a rural fence. It was him. Same waxy skin, same hat, same too wide smile. Someone had scrawled a note in the margin. They don't vanish, they wait. I dropped the book and walked out without buying anything. So yeah, laugh if you want, call it a hoax, I don't care. But if you ever see something strange in the sky and you start remembering things you maybe shouldn't, drawings, dreams, flashes of light, do yourself a favour. Do not talk about it. And if a tall man in a black suit knocks at your door, don't open it. Story 4. The Restaurant Encounter. I'd never been into UFOs. I liked X-Files, sure, but only because I had a crush on Mulder. Aliens weren't something I thought about until I saw one. Or saw something. It was late April. I'd just moved into a new apartment outside Hackettstown. Quiet area, kind of rural. I was driving home from visiting my sister, taking a back road through some farmland because Waze wasn't a thing yet, and I liked the peaceful route. That's when it happened. The sky turned a strange shade of green, almost like the air itself had tinted. Then a flash lit up the field beside me. I hit the brakes. Right there, not 50 feet off the road, a craft was hovering over a cornfield. Oval, matte grey, completely silent. It had rows of lights that pulsed in a rhythm that made my vision go fuzzy, like it was syncing to my brainwaves or something. Then it was gone. No sound, no blur, just gone. Next thing I knew, I was in my car, parked in front of a diner downtown. The clock on my dash said 11:52 p.m. Problem was, I should have arrived home by 10:15. I lost over an hour, no idea how. I didn't remember driving into town, didn't remember parking. Inside the diner, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the coffee. I kept thinking, did I have a seizure? Did I fall asleep at the wheel? But I'd felt awake, alert, and the thing I'd seen, that wasn't a dream. Then he walked in. The bell above the door jingled. I looked up. A man in black suit and hat stepped into the diner. Everything about him screamed off. His skin was waxy, pale, with a faint greenish tint under the lights. His smile was wrong, too symmetrical. His eyes never blinked, not once. He moved slowly like he was studying the room, then sat across from me in my booth. Never asked, just slid in like he'd been invited. You experienced an anomaly, he said, like he was reading from a script. You will no longer pursue memory recovery. What? I stammered. Who are you? His head tilted. Do you not recall this conversation already? I froze, because I didn't, but something about the question twisted my gut. Like, maybe we had spoken? Maybe more than once? But if we had, I had no memory of it. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. He smiled wider. Good, that's how it should remain. Then he leaned forward slightly and added, You are the kind who wants to remember. That's dangerous. He stood, walked to the counter, and this still makes my skin crawl. He picked up a spoon from the cutlery bin and bent it with his thumb like it was paper, set it down, nodded to the waitress, and left. No car, no sound. He just vanished into the night. I stared at that spoon for 20 minutes. It was twisted into a loop like taffy. I asked the waitress if she saw him. Tall guy, black suit, never blinked. She looked confused. You've been alone in here the whole time, sweetie. But he sat right there, I pointed. Nope, she said, almost too casually. The booth's been empty. I looked around. No one else seemed to have noticed him. It was like he'd never existed. But the spoon was still sitting there, bent into a near-perfect spiral. That night I couldn't sleep. My head buzzed like 1,000 mosquitoes were trapped behind my eyes. I started getting flashes, bright lights, cold metal, voices in a language that didn't sound human. I couldn't tell if they were memories or dreams. I went to a hypnotherapist. She tried regression. I started screaming during the session. My heart rate skyrocketed. I broke out in hives, and I have no memory of what I said. Only that afterwards she asked me, Do you want to continue this? Because something in you really doesn't. I said no. I stopped, but that didn't stop them. I began noticing people following me, always in pairs, always wearing black. One of them, a woman, had eyebrows that looked like they'd been drawn on with charcoal. Her lips didn't move when she talked. I started losing things. My notebooks, my tape recorder. I even recorded a message to myself one night. Convinced I'd lose the memory again, I woke up to find the cassette tape, unspooled and shredded, right inside the player. The buttons were still warm. I moved a few months later, changed numbers, changed jobs, tried to live a quieter life, and mostly I've been left alone. Except sometimes I'll be walking down the street or sitting in a cafe, and I feel it, that sensation of being watched, like something sitting just outside my field of vision. And then there'll be a man, or a woman, or something in between, wearing black, not blinking, holding a cup of coffee they never drink, looking too still, and I know I'm still on their radar. I just act like I don't notice anymore. I don't ask questions. I don't go looking for answers, because I've learned the hard way. They don't want us to forget. They just don't want us to understand. Story number 5. The Airport Encounter. I've always been a rational guy, logical. I work in IT. I'm good at math. And I've never believed in ghosts, aliens, any of that. But I believe now, because of what happened after that flight to Nevada. It was a work trip, conference in Las Vegas, standard 3-day teach thing. Nothing weird, except the flight in. That's when it all started. We were descending into McCarran Airport when the turbulence got rough, real rough, but it wasn't weather, it wasn't wind, it was light. This flash, like something exploded beside the plane, lit up an entire cabin for half a second. Everyone gasped. Even the pilot came on, clearly rattled, saying he had no visual explanation and that we may have encountered an atmospheric lensing event. The second I stepped off the plane, my head felt wrong, heavy, like my thoughts weren't sitting right. I chalked it up to jet lag and went about the conference, but the dream started that night. Bright rooms, cold metal, a low frequency hum, and shapes, humanoid, but off. No eyes, long arms, standing over me. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, ears ringing. The morning after the second dream, I noticed something, a small triangle-shaped bruise, just below my collarbone. Perfect geometry, not something I could have accidentally caused. That's when I started recording myself sleeping, audio only on my phone. The third night there was something on the recording, static, then a low voice, mechanical, monotone, whispering a word I couldn't understand. Something like Zalatha, then silence, then metal scraping. I tried to show the audio to my co-workers the next day, but the file was gone, erased. The folder still existed, but it was empty. No backup, nothing in the cloud. My flight back was delayed, so I was stuck at the airport for hours, sitting at the terminal, headphones in, trying to act normal while my skin felt like it was buzzing. That's when they appeared. Two of them, dressed like FBI agents from a TV show, black suits, black ties, pale white shirts, no name tags, but something was wrong. They didn't walk, they just floated enough to seem off, like their shoes barely touched the ground. Their faces were too smooth. One of them had no visible pores. The other blinked once, and I swear his eyelids moved sideways. They came straight toward me through the terminal, not rushed, not slow, just inevitable. I stood up, backed away. "Mr. Lane," one of them said without any emotion, "you are exhibiting signs of contamination." "Contamination?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Your memory is unstable," said the other. "This poses a threat to contaminant protocols." "What the hell are you talking about? Are you with Homeland Security or something?" "Homeland is irrelevant," the first one said. "You will follow us now." "Nope." I turned and moved fast, through the crowd, past the pret-a-manger, toward the restroom corridor. I didn't stop to check if they were behind me. I ducked into a janitor's closet, locked the door, pulled out my phone and recorded a video, thinking if something happened, at least there'd be evidence. The camera worked for 2 seconds, then the screen went black. Phone powered down. I hadn't even touched the button. No signal, no Wi-Fi, no emergency dial. I heard footsteps outside, perfectly even, like they weren't walking on tiled floor but something else entirely. Then a knock. Not hard, just rhythmic. 3 soft taps. "Mr. Lane," came the voice again, but this time through the door, even though it was a solid metal slab. You cannot hide from adjustment. The phrase hit me like ice water. Adjustment? Like they'd done it before? Like I wasn't the first? Then they were gone. Just like that. No footsteps. Retreating. No sound. I waited a full 15 minutes before creeping out. Back in the terminal, people were going about their day like nothing had happened. No sign of the men, but something was different. The lights above the gate I'd been waiting at were off. Not flickering, just off. Like the circuit had died for that part of the terminal. The rest of the place was fine. My gate changed. Flight delayed again. The gate agent smiled at me with a robotic chill. "Don't worry," she said. "They'll get to you eventually." That's when I left. Didn't board, didn't fly. I walked out of the terminal, rented a car, and drove straight out of Nevada, and I've been looking over my shoulder ever since. I've moved 3 times in 5 years. I cover my laptop camera with tape. My phone randomly powers off. Street lights blink when I walk under them. My dreams still come once a week. And sometimes, just sometimes, I'll hear a knock at my apartment door. 3 taps, always slow, always soft. I never answer. Story number 6. The Child Witness. My son has always been sensitive, smart, curious, empathetic to a fault, but also prone to night terrors. So when he woke me up one night screaming about the bright people in the trees, I assumed it was just another nightmare, but I was wrong. It started in the fall. We live on the edge of a forest near Hoodlit River, tucked in a quiet neighbourhood with a view of Mount Hood in the distance. My son, Jacob, is 7. He loves stargazing. Every night before bed, we'd go out onto the porch with his little telescope and look at the constellations. It became our thing. Then one night in early October, Jacob pointed to something in the sky and asked, "Is that a star, or is it watching me?" I looked. It wasn't a star. It was hovering, bright white, too close, then it darted sideways, unnaturally fast, and blinked out. I tried to laugh it off. Must have been a drone, but I knew it wasn't. Jacob didn't sleep that night. He kept drawing pictures of thin people with big heads and glowing eyes. He said they were outside the window. They smiled, but not with their mouths, he whispered. They smile in your head. A few days later, I found him in the backyard in the middle of the night, barefoot and staring at the woods. When I touched his shoulder, he didn't react. His eyes were glassy. He finally blinked and whispered, "They said I won't remember next time." I brought him to a child psychologist. She said it was just night terrors, stress and imagination. He'll grow out of it. But then I checked the baby monitor footage from that night. I always keep one on him, just in case. At 2:41 a.m, he sat up suddenly in bed, wide awake. Then the screen flickered, just for a second, and when it came back, the bed was empty, for over 3 minutes. Then he was back, sitting exactly where he'd been, breathing hard. I took the footage to the psychologist. She said I'd edited it, that I was projecting paranoia onto my son. I knew then we were alone in this. 2 nights later I woke up to the sound of someone knocking. 3 slow, deliberate taps. It wasn't the front door. It was Jacob's window. I rushed in. He was still asleep, but his nose was bleeding, and there were footprints in the frost on the grass outside, bare, human-like, but with only 4 toes. I called the police. They found nothing. No prints, no sign of entry, no strangers in the area. And then they showed up. The next morning, a black car parked in front of the house. 2 people got out, a man and a woman, both tall, dressed in sleek black suits that looked strangely outdated, like something from a 1960s spy film. I watched them through the blinds. They didn't knock, just stood there side by side, perfectly still. Their faces were blank, not just expressionless, emotionless. The woman's head tilted slightly, like a bird studying its prey. Then they got back in the car and drove away. No plates. That night Jacob came to my bed crying. "They want me to go with them," he whispered. "They said I'm a key." I held him all night. The next day his drawings changed. No more aliens, just people in black suits with empty oval faces. He drew a picture of me asleep, with one of them standing at the foot of my bed. I bought blackout curtains, stopped letting him sleep alone, and disconnected the Wi-Fi. I left my job. I became obsessed with keeping him safe. I started logging everything: time, weather, his mood, dreams, drawings, sleepwalking episodes. Then, one morning, all my notes were gone. The binder, the USB backups, the notebook under my bed, gone. And there was a sticky note on my fridge that read, "Good mothers forget." I broke down. I nearly took him and ran, but I knew they'd follow. That night, Jacob whispered something that haunts me still. They said if I keep remembering, they'll take you instead. I didn't cry in front of him. I just said, "It's okay, sweetheart. We're not going to let them win." And we haven't. Not yet. I homeschool him now. We moved across the state. I keep cameras up, but I don't check them unless something feels off. I don't keep written records anymore. Just memories. Just instinct. Some nights he still wakes up and asks, "Are they there?" And I lie. I say no. But sometimes I hear the knocking. 3 slow taps on the window. And I stay in bed, holding him close, praying that whatever they are, they don't want him back. Story number 1. The Porcelain Bride. When Ellie Matthews inherited her grandmother's Victorian home in a quiet New England town, she didn't expect the old house to be filled with so many antiques. Her grandmother had been eccentric, a hoarder of delicate trinkets, lace doilies and dolls. So many dolls, with glassy, watching eyes. But the one Ellie couldn't stop thinking about was kept in a glass case in the upstairs hallway. It wore a tattered bridal gown. The porcelain face was cracked like a scar, and a yellowed tag around its wrist read, "Isabel, 1872. That first night Ellie heard something, scratching, soft, deliberate, from inside the glass case. She told herself it was just the wind, or maybe even mice. But the next morning the case was open, the glass pane was resting against the wall, and Isabel was gone. Ellie searched the entire house. Nothing. Then, the following morning, Isabel was back, sitting at the end of Ellie's bed. Veil over face, eyes locked on Ellie. She locked the doll in the case again, this time bolted it, wrapped it in duct tape, and even said a prayer. But every night, the doll returned, closer and closer. One night on the nightstand, the next in the bed beside her. Ellie set up cameras. They glitched every night at 2:13 a.m, right when the doll would move. The town historian told her Isabel had belonged to a woman named Margaret, a bride who was murdered the night before her wedding, strangled in her gown, the doll left beside her. Her fiancé had vanished, and the doll passed hands for generations, until it reached Ellie's grandmother. Desperate, Ellie burned the doll. It didn't catch. She threw it in the river. It came back, waiting on her pillow. Her spirit seeks completion, the historian had said. So Ellie called a paranormal expert. At 2 a.m. they began a binding ritual. The air turned ice cold. The walls groaned. The doll's eyes bled black. The glass case exploded. An invisible force hurled the expert across the room. Crack, His head hit the wall. The doll levitated, her veil fluttering as if in water. Ellie grabbed the sewing scissors and stabbed them into the lace-covered chest. The room fell silent. Days later, Ellie moved out. She buried Isabel in a locked box beneath a concrete slab in the backyard. She never came back. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, Ellie swears she hears wedding bells ringing from under the garden. Story number 2. Buttons in the Walls. When Brian and his husband Marcus bought the old farmhouse in rural Vermont, they thought they were chasing a dream. Fresh air, quiet life, a place to build a future. But the house had other plans. On the second week of renovations, Brian discovered a sealed crawl space hidden behind the wall of the nursery. Inside it, a dusty old chest, broken toys, moth-eaten rags, and one thing that stood out, a handmade rag doll. No mouth, just button eyes, stitched seams, and a heart sewn into its chest with red thread. A note dangled from its wrist. Keep her in the walls, she hears everything. Brian laughed. A weird joke, an art piece maybe. He set the doll on the nursery windowsill and went back to work. That night he woke to whispering, faint like voices behind the walls. He nudged Marcus awake, but the sound vanished. The next morning, the doll was gone. Brian found it under the crib, lying face down, still watching, waiting. Did you move it? He asked Marcus. Marcus just shook his head. Nope. Brian packed the doll in a small box and shoved it into the basement. 2 nights later, the whispering came back, louder this time, more voices. When they opened the nursery door, the doll was sitting in the middle of the floor, facing the closet. Brian tried to throw it away, tossed it into the dumpster, but when he walked back inside, it was on the kitchen table, mud-streaked, smiling. That night, the whispering became screaming. Voices in the vents, the floor, the ceiling. The house shook. Lights exploded, mirrors cracked. The dog refused to go upstairs. Marcus began to sleepwalk. Brian found him in the nursery, sitting in the crib, cradling the doll, whispering, "She's awake now. We let her out." Terrified, Brian tracked down the previous owners. An old woman answered the door. He showed her a photo of the doll. She paled, then whispered, "That belonged to Mary, our daughter. She talked to it more than us, and after she got sick, people started getting hurt." "What happened to Mary?" Brian asked. The woman looked away. "She's still in the walls." Brian went home and tore open the nursery wall. Behind the insulation was a child-sized cavity. Inside, scattered buttons, tiny shoes, and a shriveled fabric heart. He turned. The door was behind him, button eyes sewn shut. Brian dragged it into the yard, built a fire, poured some salt, chanted anything he could find online. As it burned, a wail echoed through the streets, like a child screaming from inside the earth. After that, the house was quiet. They painted over the nursery and turned it into an office. Life went on, but sometimes Brian finds red buttons in his shoe, under his pillow, once even floating in his coffee. He never tells Marcus, because now he hears her in the walls too. Story number 3. Marionette. When Caleb's mother passed away, she left him everything: the house, the furniture, and her antique collection. He sold most of it off, except for one piece, the marionette. It had always hung in the corner of the bedroom, life-sized, paint peeling from its circus costume, wooden limbs worn smooth, a pale carved face, almost too realistic. Its glass eyes glistened like they were waiting, and on the back of its neck a carved nameplate, Lark. Caleb never remembered seeing it move, but his mother used to talk to it. Late that night, when she thought he couldn't hear, "You be good now. No more of your games." He thought it was just a sentimental thing, so he hung Lark in the corner of his apartment like a keepsake. That night, Caleb had a dream. His mother was standing at the foot of his bed, mouth open, eyes wide, pointing to something behind him. He woke up gasping. Lark was hanging in the corner, but one string was loose. The right arm now dangled lower than the rest. Over the next week, things got strange. Doors unlocked, the shower turned on by itself, and every night he heard tapping, like wooden fingers on the floor. So Caleb set up a camera. He recorded overnight. At exactly 2:47 a.m, Lark moved. His head lifted, turned slowly towards the bed. Then the footage glitched. The strings began to pull on their own, and the marionette walked across the room, arms jerking, feet clacking, a puppet without a puppeteer. Caleb left that night. He brought the footage to a spiritualist, a woman named Madame Drusilla. She watched in silence, and then said quietly, "Your mother didn't own him. She was containing him." Lark was a binding doll, made by Gustav Heim, a puppeteer who believed he could trap souls inside his creations. Lark was a masterpiece, and a curse. They said the spirit inside was once a murdered boy, and over the years he grew vengeful. Gustav was found strangled in his wagon by his own puppet strings. Drusilla told Caleb the only way to contain Lark was to return him to stillness, to bury him under sacred forgotten ground. So Caleb drove out to the ruins of an abandoned church near the woods, where no one ever went. He wrapped Lark in change, salted the crate, hammered it shut. As he lowered it into the ground beneath the altar, the marionette moved. One hand reached out and touched his arm. A voice echoed in Caleb's mind. "Play with me." He dropped the crate, poured more salt, and buried it deep. Back home he burned everything Lark had touched, the strings, the hooks, the stand. But some nights he wakes up with splinters in his skin. He hears footsteps, wooden and sharp, pacing behind his bedroom door. And in his dreams, he's not in bed. He's hanging above a stage, strings in his wrists, dancing to music he doesn't know. Story number 1. The Hollow Egg. Every Easter the town of Ashbrook came alive with colour. Pastel streamers lined the streets. Families gathered in the park for egg painting, and kids prepared for the annual Easter egg hunt, a local tradition dating back for over 70 years. This year, 12-year-old Liam Hartfield wasn't especially excited. The older he got, the less magical it felt, but his mum insisted he join. "Come on, Liam, it might be your last year before you're too cool to care," she said with a wink. So, dressed in his usual hoodie and sneakers and gripping an old wicker basket, Liam joined the swarm of kids sprinting into the Ashbrook woods behind the old Methodist church. There were hundreds of eggs hidden, some plastic, some real, all painted bright colours. Some had candy inside, some had a few dollar bills. The golden egg, a gaudy gold-painted plastic one, held a £100 gift card and was the ultimate prize. But Liam didn't find that one. He found something else. At the edge of the clearing, near an old stone well no one used anymore, Liam spotted a strange glimmer between the tree roots. It wasn't colourful like the others. It was jet black and thin. Red veins swirled across its surface, like blood under glass. Something about it felt wrong. He picked it up. It was warm. Not warm like it had been sitting in the sun. Warm like a living thing. Like it had a heartbeat. Liam stared at it, feeling an instinctual revulsion ripple through his chest. Still, curiosity got the better of him. He cracked it open. Instead of candy or money, the egg contained a single eyeball, pale, grey, bloodshot and veiny. It sat in a shallow pool of some thick, dark fluid, and when the shell split, the eyeball blinked. Liam screamed and dropped the egg, but the shell didn't shatter. It bounced like rubber, and rolled toward the well, landing with a soft plop in the grass. The eye turned in its little socket, fixating on him one last time before the egg shriveled like a fruit and melted into the dirt. He stood frozen, heart pounding, hands trembling. "Liam!" someone called. It was his friend Morgan, waving from across the clearing. "You find anything good?" Liam stammered something and nodded, stuffing his basket with a few random eggs to avoid suspicion. He didn't say a word to anyone about the black egg. Not that day, and not that night. But the next morning, the dream started. In the first dream, he was back in the woods, but everything was dead. The trees were blackened husks, the sky grey and still. The church steeple was crooked, and the bell tolled slowly without wind or movement, and standing in front of the well was a figure. It was tall, easily 8 feet, and draped in a patchwork cloak of stitched-together rabbit pelts. Its hands were long and bony, with claws like iron nails. Its head resembled a rabbit's skull, long ears, hollow eyes, and a mouth full of square, human teeth that clicked together in a rhythmic snap. It raised a finger and pointed at Liam. "You cracked my eye," it said in a rasping, wet voice. "I see you now." Liam woke up screaming. His mum rushed in, held him and soothed him. "Just a bad dream," she whispered, running her fingers through his sweat-drenched hair. "Just a dream." But it didn't feel like one. And things only got worse. Over the next week, Liam started seeing shadows that moved on their own. Every time he looked in a mirror, he'd catch a glimpse of something standing behind him, just for a second. Sometimes when he blinked, he could feel the eye inside the egg blinking at the same time. He stopped sleeping. He started sketching the things from his dreams, the towering rabbit creature in its stitched cloak and toothy grin, over and over again in the margins of his notebooks. His teachers noticed, so did his mum. "Liam, honey, Are you okay? You look pale, she said over dinner. Did something happen at that Easter hunt? He wanted to tell her, wanted to confess everything, but the thing's voice echoed in his head like a heartbeat in reverse. I see you. So he just shook his head and said he was tired. That night he woke to the sound of whispering. It wasn't coming from his room or even the hallway. It was outside his window, which faced the backyard and the woods beyond. He pulled back the curtain and looked out. There, standing in the moonlight, between the trees, it was a figure from his dream. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stared, with one glowing red eye in the centre of its skull. Liam slammed the curtain shut and crawled into bed, pulling the blankets over his head like armour. By Friday, he was unravelling. Morgan confronted him at lunch. You've been acting super weird, she said. Seriously, what's going on? Liam hesitated. Then he opened his mouth, and everything came pouring out. The egg, the eye, the dreams, the creature, the whispers, the visions. He expected her to laugh, but she didn't. Instead, she frowned. You found it too. His blood ran cold. What? When I was 9, same egg, same thing inside. I thought it was a joke at first. But then she trailed off. It started haunting me, watching me. What did you do? I buried it, deep in the forest. There's a place my grandma told me about it. Somewhere things like that can't reach. A hollow hill. You have to go alone. And you have to leave an offering. Liam stared at her, trying to process it. An offering? Morgan nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Something living. That night he packed a flashlight, a shovel, and a live mouse from the pet store. He told his mum it was for a school project. He waited until 1 a.m, then crept out the back door into the woods. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no insects, just the sound of his own breath and the distant tolling of the old church bell, even though it hadn't worked in years. After an hour of walking, he found it, a mound of earth shaped like a sleeping giant, smooth and bare, as if no vegetation dared grow there. He felt it before he saw it, a pressure in the air like static. Liam stepped onto the hill, heart hammering. He dug a small hole, placed the shoebox with the mouse inside, and whispered, I'm sorry. Then he covered it and stood back. For a moment nothing happened. Then the ground trembled. A crack split the top of the hill like an egg, and from it rose a hand, not human, not animal, but something in between. It reached towards him. Liam turned and ran. He didn't stop running until he was back in his bedroom, panting and soaked in cold sweat. For 3 nights, nothing happened. No dreams, no whispers, no eyes in the mirror. On the 4th night, Liam finally slept peacefully, but on the 5th, he woke up screaming. Not his own. He rushed into the hallway and saw his mum standing at the back door, pointing out towards the yard. Someone had dug up the garden. Not just a hole, a message. 3 words scratched into the earth, deep and jagged. That was not enough. And at the centre of the words, in a neat little circle, was a fresh black egg. Liam knew what it wanted. He couldn't ignore it any more. So the next night he walked to the well. He carried the egg in the basket, hands shaking, his heart numb. The well had been sealed off years ago, but now the stones were broken, the wood cover splintered like something had crawled out. He dropped the egg into the darkness and whispered, Take it back. Silence. Then something rose from the well. Not fully, Not enough to be seen, just its voice echoing up the stone shaft. Not mine, it's yours now. Liam backed away, breath catching in his throat. The ground around the well cracked open, and more black eggs started rising from the boils of the earth. 12, then 100, until they covered the ground like a nest. The eye in each one blinked, and from the trees came laughter, high-pitched, skittering, inhuman laughter. The rabbit thing emerged from the woods, its cloak dragging behind it, its long fingers twitching. "You broke the shell," it said. "You woke me up." Liam turned and ran, faster than he ever had, but the laughter followed. He's not in Ashbrook anymore. He doesn't speak. He just draws, over and over again. The creature, the egg, the eye. Doctors say he has PTSD. They kept him in a quiet room in the Pine Hollow psychiatric facility, where he rarely responds to visitors. But sometimes, usually around Easter, he whispers something under his breath. No one can quite make it out, except Morgan. She visited once, just once, and when he did come out of his room, she was pale as death. "Did he talk to you?" a nurse said. Morgan nodded slowly. "Yeah, just one sentence." "What did he say?" She swallowed. "The eggs are hatching." Story number 2. The Burrower. They moved to the farmhouse on a grey March afternoon. The fields were still frozen, the trees bare, and the wind had a strange kind of whisper to it, the sort that made you feel watched. The Jenkins family, Claire, David, and their 8-year-old Maddie, were looking for a new start. Claire had inherited the land from her great-aunt, a woman nobody had spoken to in years. The house came with creaky floors, faded wallpaper, and 100 acres of wood. "It has character," Claire said. David just muttered something about the renovations. On the Saturday before Easter, while planting tulips near the porch, Claire spotted something strange, a small wicker basket sitting on top step. It hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. Inside were 3 eggs, not plastic, not painted, just plain speckled brown. There was a note. No knock, no one in sight. Claire assumed it was a neighbour's kind gesture. Maddie was thrilled. She carried the basket around all day like a prize. That night, things changed. Around 2 a.m, Claire woke to the sound of scratching. Not the wind, something sharp, something deliberate. She crept into Maddie's room, half expecting to find her playing with a toy. But Maddie was curled in bed, eyes wide open. "There's something under me," she whispered. Claire knelt, lifting the bed skirt slowly. "Just dust." "You've had a bad dream," Claire said. "No," Maddie whispered, pointing towards the corner. "He's in the floor now." Claire didn't sleep that rest of the night. The next morning, Maddie didn't come down for breakfast. David found her bed empty, sheets disturbed, a faint trail of dirt leading from the headboard to the open closet door, and inside the closet, at the back, was a hole. Rough, freshly dug, less a tunnel than a vertical shaft, like something had clawed its way up, not down. Claire screamed. The police came. Search dogs, neighbours, no trace. All they found was Maddie's favourite stuffed animal laying in the garden. It seems to have been split, and stuffed inside was a small note written in clumsy handwriting. "Thank you. I need more. The Burrower." Claire lost her mind within a week. David tried to board up the house. He poured concrete over the closet floor, set up a motion sensor, and camped in Maddie's room with a shotgun every single night. It didn't help, because once the borrower takes a child from a house, he always comes back the next Easter for more. Story number 3. Peter Rottentail. It started as a rumour, one of those weird urban legends kids whisper in the middle school cafeterias and sleepovers. Don't go to Bunnyland or Easter Eve. That's when Peter Rottentail shows up. Bunnyland was a cheesy roadside attraction off Route 17. It had a faded plastic egg nailed to the fake grass walls in a tiny petting zoo, and an Easter Bunny mascot named Peter Cottontail, who posed for photos and handed out jelly beans. The place should have closed down in the 80s, but somehow it had limped into the 90s. That was when Rottentail came. The first time staff thought he was a prankster. He wore a full bunny costume like the real Peter, but his was wrong. Homemade, stained with something dark and crusty, the fur uneven and matted. The oversized head had one crooked ear and a bloodshot glass eye. Worst of all were the teeth, human, yellow, and real. He called himself Peter Rottentail. He didn't speak, just stood by the photo booth, holding a wicker basket. One of the staff asked him to leave. He didn't. He started handing out children's eggs from the basket. That's when people noticed something was off. One egg was filled with hair. Another had rotten meat. One little boy opened his and found a baby mouse, alive, but missing its legs. Parents panicked. Security escorted the man out. He didn't resist. He just walked off into the cornfields behind Bunnyland. They assumed it was over. Until the next morning. The janitor, Joe Carlson, came in early. He found the photo booth slashed to ribbons. Easter grass was soaked in blood. On the seat where Peter usually posed with kids was a single white sneaker, and inside it, a child's eye. Police never found that child. Bunnyland was shut down a week later. 15 years passed. Then one day, teenagers broke into the old Bunnyland property on a dare, filming on their phones, laughing as they climbed over rusted fences and wandered through the graffiti-tagged ruins. They found the old photo booth first, still stained, still smelling faintly of iron. One girl, Rachel, joked about sitting on the bunny's lap. "I summon thee, Peter Rottentail," she laughed, raising a toy wand. Then the static started. Their phones, all of them, glitched at once. A low hum filled the air, like a broken speaker. And then footsteps, slow, rhythmic, heavy. They turned towards the cornfield, and from the shadow of the stalks he came, same patchwork costume, same glass eye, same teeth. One kid ran and survived, the others were never found, just their phones arranged in a perfect circle around the photo booth, still recording. They say Rottentail isn't just a man in a suit, he's something else now. Some say he was a mall Easter bunny who went mad after his own daughter was trampled in a holiday rush. Others say he made a deal with something in the cornfields. Some believe Bunnyland was built on cursed land where rituals used to be performed in the spring, offering sacrifices and rabbit masks. Whatever the truth is, one thing's always the same. Rottentail comes back, only where Easter cheer has died. Abandoned malls, boarded up stalls. defunct fairgrounds. Anywhere the Easter Bunny used to appear, but he no longer does. People leave offerings now, just in case. Small baskets on doorsteps, bright plastic eggs filled with sugar. A note that will simply say, "We remember you. Don't come back." Sophie, Part 2. It was supposed to be a peaceful walk. Janice squinted into the sea breeze, her walking stick tapping rhythmically on the weather-worn boardwalk. Sophie skipped ahead, barefoot and full of energy, occasionally practicing a few slick nunchuck moves as the waves crashed nearby. "Careful with those, love," Janice called out. "You'll scare the seagulls." Sophie grinned. "They're my audience." Then she stopped. Half buried in the wet sand, something glimmered. Sophie bent down and pulled it out. A silver ring, glinting red in the afternoon sun. "Gran," she called, suddenly uneasy. Janice joined her, frowning. "Oh no, not again." It was the same ring. The same one Janice had flushed away months ago. Before she could react, the gemstone flared, deep, crimson, angry, and the sky tore open above the sea. 1,000 cracks echoed as a massive portal split the clouds like a bleeding wound. Waves churned and surged, and out of the portal came it. A hideous being rose from the water, all wet flesh, too many eyes, and jagged bone protrusions. Its roar sounded like 1,000 people screaming backward. Around it, dozens, hundreds of black-clad ninjas burst through the rippling veil behind it, landing on the beach in perfect silence. Sophie stepped in front of her grandmother. "Not today." Janice's walking stick started to click, and then with a metallic shift it unfolded and hissed into a sleek, gleaming ninja sword. She twirled it like she'd done it every single day of her life. Sophie spun her nunchucks and smiled. "You've been holding out on me, Gran." "I didn't survive the 1998 Tokyo mission by knitting." "Wait, what?" "No time. Fight now. Story later." The ninjas attacked in waves. Sophie was a whirlwind. Her nunchucks whirled and snapped with crackling precision, catching incoming blades, knocking attackers unconscious, and flipping them like rag dolls into the surf of the sea. She flipped, ducked, and kicked with the focus of a martial artist beyond her years. Janice, meanwhile, moved like a ghost, her blade humming with energy. With every graceful swipe, shadow ninjas vanished in puffs of dark smoke. She moved between them like water, dodging and striking with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime preparing for this final fight. The monster stepped forward. Its mouth was gaping. Tentacles flailed outward, knocking over entire dunes. The ring pulsed in the centre of its chest. "We have to destroy the ring," Janice shouted. "How?" "It's fused to its heart. I'm not exactly tall enough to punch it off." "We need to lure it towards the cliff." Sophie nodded, sprinting forward, flipping over a wave of ninjas. "Hey, seaweed head!" she screamed, twirling her nunchucks. "Bet you can't catch me." The beast roared and charged. Sophie darted up the rocky incline, leading it straight toward the cliff overlooking the beach. Janice fought her way through the remaining ninjas, then leapt up from dune to rock, joining Sophie just as the creature lunged upward, screeching and flailing. "Hold it off, I'll deal with the ring," Janice shouted. "I'll do better than hold it," said Sophie. With a powerful spin kick, Sophie knocked one of the creature's tentacles aside. Janice ran straight at it, sword glowing, heart pounding as she reached the creature. She leapt, driving the blade directly into the ring embedded in its chest. The impact exploded with light. A vortex opened above the sea, wild, shrieking, sucking everything towards it. The monster howled, flailing as the portal began pulling it in. The ninjas were lifted off their feet and dragged screaming into the void. Sophie grabbed Janice's hand just as the ground beneath them started to collapse. "Hold on," Sophie cried. The ring shattered with a deafening crack, and the monster was sucked piece by piece into the spiralling rift. And then, silence. The sky cleared, and the beach was still. 1 week later, Janice and Sophie sat outside in the back garden, sipping some lemonade. A radio played soft music in the background. The birds were chirping, and everything was normal. Sophie kicked her feet lazily. "So, Gran, Tokyo 1998? Janice laughed. "I was undercover. Ninja hunters. It was all very hush-hush." "You are the coolest grandmama ever." Janice raised her glass. "To the end of cursed rings and evil portals." Sophie clinked hers. "And to the best team ever." As the sun began to set, they both smiled. The ring was gone, the evil was sealed, the world was safe, for good this time. And if the darkness ever returned, well, it wouldn't stand a chance. That's all for this evening. Sweet dreams.